Hello and welcome to the Jurassic Park 3 Minute. We'll be discussing the second Jurassic Park sequel, 1 minute at a time. I'm Brad.
And Dave.
And today we're back to discuss minute 53 of Jurassic Park 3. But before we get to that, David, you found something very special during the week.
I did?
The behind the scenes.
Yeah. I thought you meant like I bought something very special. I'm like, no, I'm saving my money right now. I got a trip coming up here.
Yeah, well, it's probably a couple of weeks ago now. With the way these episodes have come out, because David, you are about to go away and return to the Redwoods, and we've had to record a few extras just to fill in the gaps while you're away. But E Entertainment, you've found a nice little behind the scenes video that has shone some new information on our favourite film.
Yeah, the Lost World E Entertainment did a Lost World episode back, I guess, when the movie must have just first came out, because I was rummaging through YouTube, actually, and was looking for like any kind of behind the scenes, anything I could find that might help me in any way in the Redwoods, and I found something that I had not seen before, which was Vince Vaughn hosting a E-Entertainment kind of like little behind-the-scenes / sales kind of thing. And it's really cool because it has a ton of footage of the Redwoods the Worker Village that I've never seen before. Sorry, I got Redwoods out of the mind.
Well, there's some shots of the Redwoods too, but a couple of those classic ones of behind the scenes with Sarah climbing over that big fallen one, which I want to see a photo of you sitting on that. It should still be there. You just got to find it. But even the work of it itself, like it starts with Vince, and it's got all the actors there having interviews in front of certain areas and aspects of the worker village. Like there, and you'd have to correct me, I don't think we've ever seen the dinosaur rib cage in location with the pipes before in the daytime.
I think they're there during the sliders, but not with the set dressing still around them, no. Now with in sliders, they kind of cleaned everything away and just kind of used the set as was. But here, the worker village still has a lot of the set dressing on it, and so that was exciting to see.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. That rib cage, the apatosaur rib cage, was still there. And he points it out and says, "Look at this! Look at this giant rib cage behind me, still in location." And yeah, even all the way through, like the power poles are still falling over. That Bronco's still parked in front of the boarding house.
Everything's still there.
Yeah,
which is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We get an interview with Ian Malcolm. I'm going to do that occasionally, say the actors' names and then their screen names. Jeff Goldblum's there having an interview next to the Bronco, and in a couple of scenes too, and Nick sort of bounces all over the place. One minute he's there at the pipes at the fence, and next minute he's up seemingly on the stairs or on the helipad looking down, and we can just see the corner of the tower base behind him with a bit more of a look there of what that structure's about, and then we get him on one of the sort of east veranda or east catwalks around the operations building, playing with his little toy, his figure of himself.
Yeah, and which is really exciting because a couple of these shots we get a couple shots of him interviewing, and behind him you can see that mysterious left side of the worker village that we've never seen before. And so that's really exciting because we're finally filling in these kind of, I guess you call them unseen parts of the map or something.
Yeah.
The blank pages of the map are being filled in.
Yeah, and we thought it was Christmas a few months ago when Todd Marks started posting some of his stuff online and seeing, again, behind the scenes and insights into stuff we'd never seen of the Lost World, and now this video that has existed for a while has just come to light, and again, as you said, showing, yes, some of the set dressing may have been replaced, but it still gives you the general layout of the floor. All the vines and also the building itself is still there, because we've even got Julianne Moore having an interview in one corner there too, and there's a heap of crates and storage stuff stored behind her, and between her interview and Vince Vaughn's interview, the classic original Jurassic InGen logo appears stenciled on stuff, which we never seen in the Lost World, apart from the security guards sort of had that a close colorized, or close to same color on their shoulder patches and caps back at the InGen Harbour, but all the vehicles that went to Sauna and everything we've seen on Sauna all had the white, the plain white InGen logo.
Which I guess you could kind of even suppose that there was some symbolism going on there, that what Hammond had built had been full of color and joy, and what Ludlow's trying to build is just a hollow shell of Hammond's dream.
Well, it's funny, you look on some of these crates and that with the InGen logo on, and even with the security guys at San Diego, when that gen is blue, that dark blue, unless it's on a light background, it's really hard to read it, really hard to see. So you can tell why they, on all the olive drab Jeeps and the trucks and that, they just made it a white logo.
Which is funny, because I actually noticed, it's funny you bring up the Jeeps, because I just noticed the other day that there's actually an inconsistency with the Jeep that Roland and Ludlow are riding in on the game trail.
Is that got to do with the lights on the top of it?
No, it has to do with the Jeep itself.
Oh.
The Jeep, when in hold on, let me give me a second to gather my thoughts here.
You're right.
When Roland and Ludlow are riding in the Jeep at the Patrick's Point location, there's no axe attached to the side of the Jeep, and the gas can is facing with the handle back towards the back. And when they're riding at the private ranch in Fieldbrook, there's suddenly a axe attached to the side of the Jeep, and the gas can is facing the opposite way, and it's strapped down differently.
You've ruined the film for me, Neil. It's funny how little things like that, it's always going to stand out now that you've told me about it.
I know. Well, it's just funny, I mean, because I was looking at it, I was looking for pictures, because I just love those Jeeps, man. I always wanted one. And it's just funny because, I mean, it's meant to be the same scene. They're meant to be the same spot on Isla Sorna, and they're never shown refueling the Jeep, and they're never shown stopping and getting out and getting into another Jeep. So it's evidently in the scene meant to be the same Jeep. Yeah. You know?
And I suppose just going back to that, before when you were saying about Nick in front of the waterfall, we've known for a long time that pond the operations building was built on had a filtration system, and that's the best way to filter water, is have it pumped up to the top of a small waterfall and have it circulating like that. Or a fountain, and just the fact that it's there on that side of the operations building, and we've never really seen that hill except for that one quick cut in sliders when they all run out the back hallway and up the ramp and up around the hill beside it, but we never actually see that in sliders itself. But one thing I do love from this behind the scenes also is we get the actors interacting with their action figures from the time. And I think they said that $250 million went into marketing and merchandise for the Lost World, which we've always said it's one of the biggest toy releases for the Jurassic franchise, and how much we love the figures that come out. But it was just fantastic. You've got Richard Schiff there in what seems like a lab coat or a white suit.
I think he's wearing a white suit. Yeah,
or at least a suit jacket anyway. But playing with a little figure of himself, and of course the Eddie Carr had a hat on, and he's referring to himself as Indiana Jones Eddie.
He asked that. He said he asked the I can't remember who he said he asked, but he said that he was wondering why his character as an action figure looked like Indiana Jones, like the hero adventurer type, and they said that he was designed before you were cast. And that was meant to be what the lead character would look like.
Well, you can just imagine the same thing with Wayne Knight. Wayne Knight? Yeah, if he'd seen his figure too, and being a comedian, he would have that would have been a good little stand-up bit, him talking about his figure.
Wait, now I do like the detachable arm on his action figure, but the other way, everything else about it just looks like a generic Bond villain. lackey, you know? Like, it looks like the kind of guy that you'd see in the background of a James Bond movie, locking down James Bond to the table so that Dr. Evil or whatever villain he's facing can use the laser on him.
Fire the laser! But yeah, it's a fantastic behind the scenes. It's about 43 minutes long, I think it is, or 42 minutes long. We'll if we haven't already, we'll definitely post a link up to it in the Facebook group, and we're going to dig deep into it over the next few weeks, and we'll return with a Jurassic Mysteries and have a good look at some of the extra stuff it reveals. Like even they've got Vanessa Lee Chester sitting there in front of some of the steam pipes for the geothermal plant, and just again the detail, the moss on those pipes, something that was never going to be on film, or never ended up on film, and just the detail is absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, we've spoken before about this, just how much we love, just how much detail was put into this set specifically too. You know.
Yep. And there's one behind the scenes image of the operations building, and you can actually see sort of the concrete structures either side, sort of its main backbone, I suppose you'd say, to keep it up off that water, and it's almost identical to the concrete beams either side of the main Jurassic Park gates. Just that triangular concrete structure there, and then all the glass and that's built around it. So,
no, it's interesting because a lot of the InGen infrastructure in the 90s had this trapezoidal kind of shape about it. And you get it here in the worker village too. And back in on Isla Nublar, a lot of the buildings from the entrance to the visitor center, the doors to the maintenance shed and the emergency bunker, even the tunnel outsides that we saw, had this trapezoid shape to them. And that returns here in the worker village with the shape of the operations center having these trapezoid-like shapes to them from the front of the building, and even the shape of the building itself being kind of like a four-sided trapezoid.
Yeah. Yep, and we're going to see it again in a couple of minutes' time when we get to the aviary as well, with the building on top of the canyon. It's probably our most Jurassic-looking building we've had in the sequel since Jurassic Park. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. So, yep, check out the Facebook page and have a bit of a look through that video, and David will be back to discuss that in a couple of weeks' time.
Does anyone have a question that does not relate to Jurassic Park? Or the incident in San Diego, which I did not witness?
Briefly checking out an article over at Jurassic-Pedia.com, we've got a fantastic article written up here on the satellite phones in the films, which of course is the one we have here ringing in the Spinosaur's belly, and the one that Eddie takes along to Isla Sorna as well in the Lost World. Good bit of detail there. We've got the Mitsubishi ST-155, which is the one Eddie took. Bit of detail about that. I do love to hear how some of the call costs $15 a minute back in the day, and how the phones themselves cost thousands, and even mention here the discussion we had last minute or a minute before of, was it actually Paul's phone, considering how much the phone itself would have cost back in the day, and how his how his finances might not have justified the purchase. But
and again, I mean, you're going to a remote location. I think that they justified a satellite phone in the Lost World because the fact that Isla Sorna is so remote, you're not going to get cell service out there, or even radio service out there. So if you really want to contact somebody, you'd have to have satellite contact. You know?
Yeah, that's your last resort. That's your key or ticket when they ticket off the island, and you'd have to have it just in case. Because I suppose they'd have no. We might have mentioned this back when we were at the airport too. They'd have no way of knowing if they could even land. If they tried to land, if the plane would land successfully without braking, or all that sort of thing, or even tying a red balloon to the phone, throwing out of the plane if they found Eric on the beach or something.
Mm-hmm.
So at least he could call. But yeah, head over to Jurassic-Pedia and check out that article and many more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, David, 53, ready to get into it.
Sure.
As we enter minute 52 of Jurassic Park 3, the Kirby's and Billy started walking off into the jungle. Elsewhere, Alan and Eric had been walking also, when Eric started to hear his father's satellite phone, and started running in the direction of the sound, calling out, "Mum, Dad." As we open on minute 53, we're back with the Kirby's. At the 5-second mark, Paul stops Amanda. He hears something. As we wait for a minute through the sound of the bugs in the jungle, we hear Eric call out, "Mum, Dad." Excited, Paul and Amanda start to run off in the direction of the sound of their son. Amanda nearly falls over. Then Billy has to try and turn around, catch up, and chase after the Kirby's. Over the next couple of seconds, as the triumphant music begins to build, we cut back between Eric and the Kirby's, running through the jungle, calling each other's names. At the 24-second mark, Amanda and Paul emerge into a clearing and run through the fog towards the sound of their son calling out their name. 26-second mark, we briefly cut back to Alan and Eric as they too enter a clearing. This time the camera seems higher up, and we cut back to Amanda and Paul still running as a man-made structure begins to frame the image. We pull back to see that there's a fence between them and their son. At the 33-second mark, they both arrive at the fence, and Eric throws his arms through the cabling and hugs his mother, and Paul says, "I knew it, I knew you were alive." The three hug continuously as Paul and Grant catch up. They move to their own section of the fence and put their hands through the cabling and shake hands. At the 44-second mark, Billy says, "Boy, am I glad to see you." At the 50-second mark, Grant starts to walk backwards, but Billy asks, "Do you want me to carry it?" Grant continues to walk back, puts his hands on his hips and looks up at the fence and says, "We need to find a gap here." We get a cut to Grant's viewpoint, looking up at the top of the fence, and the large spikes that are at the top. And as the minute ends, we cut back to the Kirby's, as Paul asks Eric, "How'd you know we're here?" Last minute, we just got the cut of Billy, Paul and Amanda continuing to walk through the jungle after Eric had started running off from Grant after hearing the satellite phone. And once again, we're here in this tight jungle, which I'm going to say is a set because we'll see a stream in a minute when they run away. But and also it might be a set too because you can. When Billy's walking, his footsteps sound really loud and hollowish, like he's walking on plywood or something.
Yeah. And then we get... I'm going to break the bubble here and say that the tree that we enter the shot, we get a pan down from a tree, and that tree branch just does not look realistic. You know, it looks like something out of King Kong or something, and it definitely looks like a set. You know.
Yeah, I think we mentioned. You mentioned a few months ago when you got the Blu-rays out and rewatched the films, and I'd done that recently as well. And Jurassic Park 3 was one I wasn't really looking forward to in high def because of the some of the issues with CG and the sets. But then Paul hears something, and you got to have the volume right up to hear it, but you can sort of hear Eric's first faint cry coming out through the jungle, and
yeah,
Amanda stops, and they both listen for a minute, and you can start to hear Eric calling out Mum and Dad again, and Paul and Amanda start to run off to the left. Amanda trips as she's running, so she's in that much of a hurry, and Billy sort of looks around, realises he's getting left behind, and has to run and catch up as well. And
it's interesting because you can actually hear the satellite phone when Eric hears it. It's like something you'd have to have like surround sound on or something, but I remember even in the theater when I was a kid that it was like you heard the satellite phone ring, and then you see Eric perk up, and you know he's hearing what you're hearing, you know.
Yeah, it seems in both occurrences where Eric hears the phone and then the Kirby's hear Eric, they stop and hear something that we can't hear until they actually mention it. Because I don't think you can hear the satellite phone until Eric says, "Stop, shush, listen." And even here, I don't think it's not until when Paul stops and says, and hears something, then you can hear that faint Eric, or faint mum and dad call out from Eric.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as this shot here ends, they sort of run up a bit of a slight rise, and again you can see that stream bed that running through the set. As the emotional music begins to build, we sort of cut back and forth between the two groups as they're running closer together and yelling louder and louder, and we finally see Paul and Co emerge from the forest into a clearing with some tall grass in spots, and as we've mentioned previous minutes, that fog machine working overtime. If it's real, it might even be CG. It looks that bad. I don't know, but
I'd imagine like real fog would probably be a lot cheaper than CGI fog, though.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, it might not have been blown in the right way.
And this was done on location though too. It was this one was done at Kahili, I think, the one where they filmed the first movie actually.
Yeah, I didn't read.
Same ranch they filmed the first movie in.
Yeah, I know there's been a few people visiting the area recently, and the tree that's beside the fence here in a minute's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of see where they CG'd in the rest of the fence going off into the distance. But before we get to that, it might be just the way it's shot here, because when Paul and Amanda and that come out of the jungle, the camera's sort of down at head height. But when we cut to Grant and Eric running out of the jungle, it seems to be up higher, almost from the view of the Spinosaur looking down at them as they run out into the clearing as well. And it also looks like there's Eric and Grant are running uphill towards Paul and Amanda. But as we continue to watch Paul and Amanda run towards us through the grass, the camera begins to pull back, and we get our first shots of the man-made object, the fence. And as we pull back further, we get to see much more of the fence, and as we cut behind Amanda and Paul as they approach, calling out to Eric.
Hammond, you liar.
Well,
There's supposed to be no fences.
Before we get to that, we get the music swell and they come together, and I love how there's a bit of that the sound effect of clanking as Eric hits the steel beam there and sort of puts his hands through the fence and to cuddle. I'm glad, or it's obviously didn't look up and see the high voltage sign on it, and there's no return joke of Grant in the first film saying wait and pick up a stick and then throw at it. But
I was going to say, it's funny because it doesn't even say how high voltage on these signs. It just says danger high voltage.
Yeah, yep.
There's no 10,000 volt sign or anything like there was even on the Worker Village.
Yeah, true. But Billy finally catches up and sees Grant. The two shake hands, and Billy says, "Boy, am I glad to see you." Then notices Grant has got his bag and says, "Hey, you have my bag." And Grant smiles and says, "Yeah, lucky strap," which is a little bit of a dig there. And then Grant starts to step back and look up at the fence. And Billy asks Grant if he wants Billy to carry it, and Grant just says, "We need to find a gap here." But let's get to this fence. Yes, Hammond, you liar. It's a big one. It's bigger. It's we'll talking before with the architecture of the worker village and sort of the building sharing much of the same sort of design, but here we got this big monstrosity.
This thing is built heavily, and it makes me think it was built for the Spinosaurus, just because whatever they were keeping in here, they did not want to get out. Yeah. They have more than just the those big girders going across of it. They have smaller kind of net wire going across it too that presumably was also electrified. And then the top has these giant spikes on them. Like even if it tries to climb over the top, it's gonna have a bad time, you know?
This could also be a reaction to what happened on Nublar. I'm sure Grant and that would have been debriefed or whatever by InGen. They would have discussed how the Tyrannosaur escaped. Where here, instead of having just those cables, if there's a power fail, you've still got these massive beams set in this really fortified concrete base. Then these massive cross poles, and this, I think there's about 6 or 7 of them. Yeah, 6 cross beams. The higher the fence, so it's going to stop the animal pushing through it for the most part as well. And then just to to piss the animal off even more, they've got this grid. It's almost like a cargo net of. I'm sure it's supposed to be cable, but again, high def, and looking at it, it's clearly just rope with some plastic notches keeping it together to keep the grid pattern. But yeah, just these large grid pattern of cabling on the front of it in a large section, and you don't see it here, but as they start to run down along the fence, you can actually see the wires and insulation going between sections across the front of the poles. So they are supposed to be electrified just to annoy the animal more. But yeah, as you said, like the massive spikes on top just to stop the Spinosaurus sticking its head over. It makes me wonder why it's here. If it's just something to keep the aviary safe, but then yeah.
Well, another thing to keep in mind is that the in the Jurassic Park canon, the Spinosaurus was meant to be have been cloned after the events of 1997, and even though that wasn't considered at the time this movie was filmed, it does kind of explain a lot. Just because, I mean, as Hammond said, there was not meant to be any fences, and if he didn't know that this was built, he technically wasn't lying.
And that could explain also why it's such a dramatic shift from what we've seen before with park fences. Like even in the Lost World, we have the same design, almost identical design fence around the worker village as we do on Nublar. And here, if they did have the Spinosaur created in 99 or 97, whenever they DPG said it was created, then maybe they did come in and make this fence to keep the animal contained. Unfortunately, it doesn't explain. Well, I suppose it got out obviously and put a hole in it, but it doesn't really explain how these two groups come to be on either side of it. In the script, there's no fence here at all, so I don't know if that was just something from a past revision of the script that was added because they had the set built. Because we're going to have that same problem in a couple of minutes' time with the it chasing the survivors into the observation building of the aviary. But as sort of Grant looks up, and you can see sort of those similar amber and blue lights on the poles as well, much like we've seen on Nublar. So that's probably the only real familiar bit to link back to Nublar. But as you said too, also got the high voltage signs there, but not actually how high voltage it actually is. And in the novel, sort of Eric looks up and realises they can't climb it, but I think it'd be pretty easy to climb. Those spikes are that large. I think you'd be able to get over. If it was razor wire or something, you'd be more trouble, but I think with some time you'd be able to get up over it. It's only Eric and Grant. Grant's climbed the fence before.
I mean, yeah, he could, but the Spinosaurus definitely could not. And I think they're also trying to avoid the fact that, well, that comes in after he says this, but once the Spinosaurus shows up and they get chased, there's really no option of climbing over.
Oh, yeah. It'd put you at a very convenient biting height.
Yeah.